The communist dream from ideal to reality. Communism promised a utopia, a classless society sharing resources equally, born from Marx and Engels' critiques of capitalism. It offered an alternative to industrial age inequalities. But the gap between theory and practice was vast. Ideals clashed with the realities of power and control. This struggle shaped the 20th century profoundly. The Soviet experiment seeds of authoritarianism. The Soviet Union, under Vladimir Lenin's Bolsheviks, became the first nation to adopt communism. The 1917 revolution promised peace, land, and bread. However, it quickly descended into civil war and political repression. The Bolsheviks, determined to consolidate power, created a one-party state. Dissent was silenced, and opponents were eliminated. Joseph Stalin's rise to power marked a darker turn. His brutal policies of forced collectivization and industrialization resulted in widespread famine and death. Millions perished in labor camps, victims of paranoia and political purges. The Soviet Union, once a beacon of hope for the oppressed, had become a totalitarian state. This authoritarian model, with its centralized control and suppression of individual liberties, became a hallmark of communist regimes. The state controlled all aspects of life, from the economy to education and culture. Individuals were expected to conform to the dictates of the party, sacrificing their personal freedoms for the supposed good of the collective. Beyond the Iron Curtain, global echoes of communism. After World War II, communism spread beyond the Soviet Union, taking root in Eastern Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Each country had its unique history and challenges, but they shared common threads. Communist parties, often backed by the Soviet Union, seized power, promising social justice and economic equality. China, under Mao Zedong, underwent its communist revolution in 1949. Mao's Great Leap Forward, aimed at rapid industrialization, led to a devastating famine that killed millions. The Cultural Revolution, launched in 1966, unleashed a decade of political violence and social upheaval. Millions were persecuted, and China's cultural heritage suffered irreparable damage. Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge, Cuba under Fidel Castro, and North Korea under Kim Il-sung all followed similar trajectories. While each country had its unique characteristics, they shared a common theme: the concentration of power in the hands of a few, the suppression of dissent, and the failure to deliver on the promised utopia. The human cost repression and economic failure. Communism's human cost was staggering. Millions perished under totalitarian regimes, victims of political purges, forced labor, and state-induced famines. From the Soviet gulags to the killing fields of Cambodia, the 20th century bore witness to the horrors of unchecked state power. The suppression of individual rights became a defining feature of communist states. Centralized planning led to inefficiencies and shortages. The lack of incentives for innovation stifled economic growth. The result was widespread poverty and a lower standard of living. Cracks in the facade, the inevitable collapse. By the late 20th century, the cracks in the communist facade were becoming impossible to ignore. The Soviet Union, burdened by economic stagnation and a protracted war in Afghanistan, began to crumble from within. Mikhail Gorbachev's reforms, intended to revitalize the system, inadvertently hastened its demise. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 marked a pivotal moment. The Iron Curtain, which had divided Europe for decades, began to disintegrate. One by one, communist regimes across Eastern Europe collapsed, replaced by democratic movements eager to embrace freedom and market reforms. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 signaled the end of an era. Communism, once a global force challenging the capitalist West, had faltered under the weight of its own contradictions. The dream of a classless utopia had given way to the reality of authoritarianism, economic failure, and widespread human suffering. Lessons from history: the enduring legacy of communism. Communism's history offers lessons about unchecked power and individual liberty. Its legacy still shapes our world today. Understanding communism's failures helps us learn from the past. It's about protecting fundamental rights and recognizing human dignity. The legacy of communism reminds us of freedom's fragility and the need to safeguard it.